Good evening, my friend. I want you to settle in for a moment. There is no rush here. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do, and nothing you need to figure out in the next few minutes. Simply be here with me and let what I am about to share with you find its way into the quiet places of your mind. Tonight I want to talk to you about something very simple, and because it is very simple, I want you to resist the urge to complicate it. The mind, you see, has a habit of reaching for complexity whenever it encounters something that threatens to dissolve a very old confusion. So when you feel that urge rising, that impulse to say yes, but how exactly, I want you to gently set it aside. We are not here tonight to build a mechanism. We are here to correct the direction. And that is a far easier thing than most people believe. Let me begin with something ordinary. Think of a person you have known for a long time, perhaps a friend from your childhood, or someone you grew up beside, someone whose face is as familiar to you as the walls of your own room. Think of them now, and I want you to notice something very particular about the act of thinking of them. When that person's face rises in your mind, when the sound of their voice comes back to you, when you remember sitting with them at some table somewhere, laughing about something that seemed important then, do you feel an ache? Do you feel a strain? Do you feel your heart reaching outward with great effort, trying to pull that person toward you? No, of course not. You simply remember them. The memory arrives on its own, almost without invitation. It settles into your mind like a stone settling to the bottom of a still pond. There is no grasping. There is no effort. There is no distance to cross, because in the act of remembering, that person is not somewhere else. That person is here with you, as close as thought itself. And the feeling that accompanies that memory is not desperation. It is not longing. It is something far quieter than that. It is familiarity. It is warmth. It is the particular kind of ease that only comes when something has been yours for a long time. I want you to hold that feeling, not dramatically, not with great intention. Simply notice it the way you might notice the warmth of a cup of tea that you have been holding without thinking about it. That quiet, ordinary warmth. That is what I am going to ask you to return to again and again over the course of this evening. Because that feeling, that particular feeling of remembering something that already belongs to you, is the secret to everything I want to teach you tonight. Now let me turn to the subject most of you have come here with in mind. There is someone, there is always someone. And everything inside you is oriented toward that person the way a compass needle is oriented toward the north. You think of them when you wake. You think of them at odd moments during the day, standing in some ordinary place, suddenly overtaken by their absence. You check things, your telephone, your messages, your memory of the last conversation, the way a person checks a wound to see if it has healed. And underneath all of it, there is a hoping, a persistent, exhausting hoping, a hoping that carries with it the weight of the fact that what you hope for has not yet arrived. And this is where I want to pause, because this is where the great mistake lives. Most people, when they want someone back in their life, when they want a relationship to be real and present and whole, they approach it the way you might approach a destination on a long road. They face forward. They see the thing they want as something ahead of them at some distance, requiring effort to reach. And so they walk toward it. They want toward it. They hope toward it. And every time they check to see how far they have come, they discover something very discouraging. They discover that the destination is still ahead, still in the future, still not here. And this, my friend, this is not a failure of effort. It is not a failure of deserving. It is a failure of direction. Because when you face towards something, when you orient yourself toward a future in which something is true, you are simultaneously and unavoidably standing in a present in which it is not. And the subconscious mind, that vast, quiet, extraordinarily faithful servant that lives beneath the surface of your ordinary thinking, does not distinguish between what you want and what you are rehearsing. It does not hear your wishes. It does not respond to your hopes. It responds to what you are rehearsing. It responds to the reality you are practicing moment by moment in the privacy of your own imagination. And if you are practicing a reality in which the person you love is absent, in which the relationship is not yet real, in which you are walking towards something that remains always slightly ahead of you, that is the reality your subconscious will faithfully maintain. Not because it is cruel, not because it is indifferent, but because it is, above all else, consistent. It will always confirm what you have given it to believe. So the question is not, how do you want more? The question is not, how do you try harder? The question is something far simpler and far stranger than that. The question is this: what if you stopped walking toward it? What if you turned around? Now let me explain what I mean, because I want to be very precise here, and I want to be very gentle, because what I am about to describe is going to feel unusual the first time you encounter it. But I want you to remember what I said at the beginning of this evening. The mind will reach for complexity. Your task is to remain with the simple thing. And the simple thing is this: memory works differently than hope. When you hope for something, you are always at a distance from it. There is always a gap between you and the thing you want, and that gap is the very substance of hope. Hope requires absence. You cannot hope for something you already have. And this is why hope, for all its nobility, for all the beautiful things that have been written about it, is a very poor tool for creation. Because every act of hoping is also quietly and inevitably an act of confirming that the thing you hope for is not here. But memory is different. When you remember something, you are not at a distance from it. You are not reaching toward it across a gap. The thing you remember is, in the act of remembering, fully present, fully real, fully settled. A remembered event does not feel like something you are waiting for. It feels like something that happened. And the feeling that accompanies a true memory, not a forced memory, not a constructed memory, but a natural, settled memory, is not excitement, it is not longing. It is the quiet, ordinary sense of something that belongs to the past, something that was and therefore always will have been. And here is what I want you to understand very deeply tonight. The subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between a memory of something that happened in the world and a memory of something that happened in the imagination. What it responds to is not the origin of the impression. What it responds to is the feeling that accompanies it, the quality, the texture, the emotional signature, you might say, of the thing being held in mind. And the emotional signature of a true memory is settled, quiet, ordinary, real in the way that breakfast is real, or the feel of a familiar coat is real. Not dramatic, not desperate, just there. So what I am inviting you to do tonight, and what I will continue to invite you to do for the rest of this conversation, is to construct a memory, a very particular kind of memory, a memory of a relationship that in the outer world you feel has not yet fully arrived, and to practice holding that memory with the same quiet, ordinary, settled feeling with which you might remember an old friend whose face you know as well as your own. Let me take you through this very carefully. I want you to imagine that you are not where you are right now. I want you to imagine that a great deal of time has passed. Not a dramatic amount of time. Not years and years into some distant future, but some comfortable distance of several months perhaps. Enough time for things to have settled. Enough time for the relationship you are thinking of to have found its natural rhythm. Enough time for it to feel normal. You are there now. You are several months into a relationship that feels, above all else, normal. And from there, from that comfortable, settled place, I want you to look backward, not forward, backward. The way you might look back at a road you have already traveled, seeing it from the other end. Seeing how it led here without any drama, without any great effort. Simply and naturally, the way all roads eventually lead somewhere. Look back from several months into this relationship and remember when things shifted. Remember the moment. You don't need to know the exact date or the exact hour. Memory doesn't work in exact dates and hours. But remember the general feeling of the time when contact was reestablished, when the conversation began again. It might have been simple, a message that arrived, something ordinary and undramatic that opened a door that had seemed for a while to be closed. And you remember how that felt. Not the frantic, high-pitched feeling of someone receiving news they have been desperate for. Because desperation is a forward-facing feeling and you are looking backward now. You remember it the way you remember most good things from the past, with a gentle, perhaps slightly amused recognition. Oh yes, that was when it started again. That was when things began to move. And then you remember the early days of talking again. How natural it felt. Surprisingly natural, as if the gap had not been quite as long as it seemed. How the conversation found its rhythm quickly. The way old rivers find their banks after the dry season. Not because of any particular effort, but simply because that is the nature of rivers and of people who belong together. You remember a specific afternoon, or perhaps an evening, when you were in the same place together, and there was nothing remarkable about it. That is what you remember most clearly, the absence of remarkableness. You were simply together, doing something ordinary, talking perhaps, or sitting in companionable silence, the kind of silence that is not uncomfortable, because there is nothing to prove, nothing to perform, nothing to demonstrate. You were simply there, together, and it was simply good. You remember a moment when they said something to you. Perhaps they said that they loved you, and you remember that it did not arrive as a shock, or a relief, or a sudden release of long-held tension. It arrived the way most true things arrive when the timing is right, as a confirmation of something you both already knew, as a formality almost. A pleasant one. You remember smiling, but not with the wild, overwhelmed smile of someone who has just received something they thought they might never have. With the quieter, softer smile of someone who is glad that what is true has been said aloud. You remember the texture of ordinary time with this person. Waking up in the morning knowing they are part of your life. Small communications during the day, not frantic, not invested with enormous weight, but easy and light and routine, the way all communication becomes when it is no longer precious because it is no longer rare. You remember feeling secure, not excited in that breathless, precarious way that excitement always carries with it some shadow of its possible disappearance. Secure. The way you feel secure in a chair you have sat in many times and know will hold your weight. And from this place, this settled, comfortable place, several months into a relationship that is simply yours now, I want you to notice something very important. You are not hoping for anything. You have nothing to hope for, because you have nothing to lack. The relationship you once dreamed of, once chased, once checked for signs of like a patient watching for the first light of morning, that relationship is simply your life now. It has the texture of your life. It has the weight and the ordinariness of your life. And that is the feeling I am asking you to live inside. Not for hours, not with great discipline. Simply to visit, to inhabit briefly, to let become familiar. Because here is what happens when you rehearse that feeling consistently. The subconscious mind, which I told you earlier is a faithful servant, begins to receive a new set of instructions. And the instructions it receives are not delivered in the form of wishes or commands or desperate pleadings in the night. They are delivered in the most powerful language there is, the language of established facts, the language of memory, the language of things that have already been. And the subconscious mind, which cannot tell the difference between what happened in the world and what was fully and feelingly rehearsed in imagination, begins to orient the whole of its vast machinery toward confirming what has been given to it as established. It does not ask how. It does not ask when. It asks only what. And you have told it very clearly what. You have told it through the settled and ordinary feeling of your remembered future, that this relationship is real, that it is yours, that it has been yours, and it will work in ways entirely beyond your conscious understanding or control, to confirm that reality in the outer world. This is not magic, my friend, or rather, it is not magic in the way the word magic has come to mean something impossible or supernatural, or requiring belief in forces beyond the natural order of things. It is simply the natural operation of a mind that has been given clear instruction, a mind that has been freed from the frantic, contradictory, exhausting work of wanting something it believes it does not have, and given instead the simple, quiet, enormously powerful task of confirming something it has been told is already true. Now I want to speak to the feeling for a moment, because the feeling is everything. I cannot say this too many times. The feeling is everything. Many people, when they first attempt this kind of work, make a very understandable mistake. They attempt to construct the imagined memory with great emotional intensity. They feel that they must feel strongly, that the vividness of the exercise depends on the strength of the emotion they bring to it. And so they attempt to feel the joy of reunion, the relief of reconciliation, the high, bright, luminous happiness of getting what they wanted after wanting it so much. And I want to gently suggest that this is precisely the wrong feeling to reach for, because joy of that kind, relief of that kind, is still a forward-facing feeling. It is still the feeling of someone who has just received something they did not have before. And even wrapped in the clothing of imagination, it carries the emotional signature of lack, of distance, of the gap between where you are and where you want to be. The feeling I am asking you to reach for is much quieter than that. It is the feeling of Tuesday afternoon. It is the feeling of something that has been true long enough to become simply true, without fanfare, without ceremony, without any particular emotional charge. The feeling of knowing someone's coffee order, the feeling of recognizing their way of laughing, the feeling of having a shared language made up of references and jokes and small private understandings that have accumulated the way all shared languages accumulate through the simple passage of ordinary time together. It is the feeling of not having to think about it. That is the feeling I am asking you to practice. The feeling of not having to think about it, because it is simply there. The way your own name is simply there. The way your own face in the mirror is simply there. Familiar, unquestioned, settled into the fabric of what is simply real. Let me now speak to you about what to do with this practically, because I believe in practical things. Before you sleep each night, and I choose this time deliberately, because the mind in the moments before sleep is soft and receptive in ways it is not during the busy activity of the day. Before you sleep, I want you to take a few moments and visit the memory I have described to you, not with effort, not with intensity. Simply visit it the way you might visit a pleasant room in your memory, a room from your past that you remember fondly, that you can inhabit briefly and easily without any particular work. Settle yourself, let the day go, and then gently allow your imagination to find itself at that point several months from now. Already inside the relationship, already comfortable, already past the threshold of reunion and reconciliation and all the complicated emotional weather of beginning. Simply there, simply together. And let your imagination rest there for a few minutes, not directing it dramatically, not forcing it through a series of scenes, but simply letting it settle, the way you let yourself settle into a comfortable bed at the end of a long day. Let the small details come on their own. The sound of a message arriving and knowing, without even reading it, that it will be from them. A memory of an evening together that felt unremarkable and was therefore, in the way that unremarkable evenings always are, quietly precious. A moment of looking at this person and feeling not the anxious, careful love of someone afraid of losing what they have, but the steady, quiet love of someone who has had what they have long enough to trust it. And then let sleep take you. Do not analyze what you have just done. Do not evaluate it. Do not ask yourself whether you did it correctly, or whether it will work, or whether you felt the right things in the right proportion. Simply let it go, the way you let go of all the other thoughts of the day as sleep comes. Trust that what you have given to the quiet mind beneath your waking mind is enough, because it is. The small, ordinary, settled memory of a relationship that is simply yours is more than enough. It does not need your supervision. It does not need your anxiety on its behalf. It simply needs to be given and trusted. And this is perhaps the hardest thing I will ask you to accept tonight. Trust is not a dramatic act. It is not a sustained act of will. It is not something you have to maintain by constant attention, the way you might maintain a flame in a strong wind, cupping it with both hands, watching it anxiously to make sure it does not go out. Real trust is much quieter than that. Real trust is the confidence of someone who has planted a seed and gone inside for the night, knowing that growth happens in the dark, knowing that the seed does not require their presence or their worry or their repeated digging up to check on its progress. Plant the seed in the few minutes before sleep, and then go inside. Go inside and trust. Now, there is one more thing I want to address, because I have spoken to enough people about these matters to know the question that is forming, even now, in the minds of some of you. You may be wondering what to do with yourself during the day. During the long hours between those quiet minutes before sleep, when the ordinary world is present and demanding and offers no particular encouragement to the thing you are practicing in the dark. During those hours when you see something that reminds you of the person, or when the silence of your telephone becomes very loud, or when the old patterns of checking and hoping and wondering threaten to reassert themselves, and my answer is simpler than you might expect. You do nothing, or rather, you do what is before you. You live your ordinary life. You attend to what is present. And when the thought of this person arises, as it will, because the mind is a river and certain thoughts have worn deep channels in it, when the thought arises, you do not fight it. You do not suppress it. You do not replace it with tremendous effort. You simply notice briefly what feeling accompanies the thought. And if the feeling carries the weight of absence, the weight of longing towards something in the future, you let it pass without adding your attention to it, without feeding it. The way you might let an unimportant cloud pass across a sky that you know is blue behind it. And if you find it easy in that moment to briefly touch the memory, the settled, ordinary memory of the relationship as it already is, not dramatically, not with great effort, just a brief visit, the way you might briefly recall any pleasant and established thing, then do that, but without pressure, without performance, without checking afterward to see whether you did it well enough. Because the work is not in the checking, the work is in the remembering. And remembering, true remembering, is always quiet. I have spoken to you tonight about direction, about the difference between facing toward a future in which something is true and standing inside a memory of that same truth, looking backward. I have spoken to you about the quality of feeling that serves you and the quality of feeling that, despite its intensity, works against you. I have spoken to you about the subconscious mind and its extraordinary faithfulness, and about the language it responds to, which is the language of settled fact rather than urgent hope. And I want to close with something that I hope you will carry with you beyond this evening. Everything you have ever wanted, everything you have ever loved, everything that has ever felt like yours, it exists first in the imagination, not as a vision of the future, not as a hope, but as something that feels when the imagination is working rightly, as natural and ordinary and already true as the chair you are sitting in now. The great mistake of the age we live in is the belief that reality creates imagination, that we first receive and then believe. But it has always been the other way. It has always been that we first believe, quietly, steadily, without drama, and then the world, which is a faithful and somewhat unhurried mirror, arranges itself to confirm what we have given it to reflect. The relationship you want is real, not in the future, not waiting for you across some gap of time and effort. Real in the only place where anything is ever first real, which is in the quiet country of your own deepest imagination. And the way to claim it is not to walk toward it with great effort, but to remember it, simply to remember it, with the same ease and naturalness and quiet certainty with which you might remember an old friend's face. It is already there, my friend. It has always been there. Your only task is to remember it as such, and to let the faithful, quiet mind beneath your waking mind arrange the world accordingly, in its own time, in its own way, with an intelligence and an ingenuity that belongs to depths of you that you will never fully see from the surface of your ordinary thinking. Plant the seed tonight. Go inside, trust, and when you wake tomorrow, be ordinary, be present, be patient in the way of someone who has no reason to be impatient, because what they are waiting for is, in the truest sense, already there. I am grateful, as always, for your company this evening. Good evening, my friends, and I'll see you next time.